It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Real estate. Real estate, this is the one that most people who say they're doing passive income, they're usually pushing real estate strategies. And real estate is, without a doubt, a great way to build wealth. So don't hear me pick on it as a passive income strategy and say, well, he just hates real estate. No, I'm just saying that it requires, to be successful, it's going to require some work.
And I think the daydream is, when it comes to rental properties, okay, I'm gonna buy this property, and I'm gonna get a mortgage on it, and then I'm gonna have someone come in, and they're gonna pay rent, and they're gonna cover the cost of me owning this asset, and then one day I'll sell it, and they would have essentially bought the thing for me. So it didn't cost me any money to buy it, and then I was able to get back my initial investment plus capital appreciation. It's just that easy.
So let's look at the brochure. What are people selling this dream of passive real estate income? And it is exactly what you said. It's just that this has got a little more sizzle to it because we put attractive people, houses, free money.
Yep.
Is that you just sit back and collect that rent, Bo. That's what you do with real estate. You go get you some rental property and sit back and collect that rent.
And here's the really easy part. If you buy more rental properties, you have more passive income. So don't just do one. Once you've done one, you have a tenant, then go do another and another and another. And all of a sudden, you are a real estate rental property tycoon.
You're a mogul.
That's a mogul. That's even a better word.
That's what the goal is. So let's talk about, this is what the brochure is. Let's talk about the reality. Okay. And this is where my years of doing tax preparation is going to pay off for you guys, because you're going to learn from what I experienced with my own rental property. I've been an accidental rental landlord in some degrees, and then I've worked with a lot of clients that had
on more than one occasion, actually.
Yeah, so there's a lot of wisdom from experience in this. So here, let me give you the reality check on rental property, because the brochure you heard, if one is good, sit back and collect the free rent. Why not do 10? Why not do 20? Why not do 100? And then you can be rich beyond your wildest imaginations. But here's the reality. If you did 10 rental properties, I'm going to walk you through, and I want to give you some cold water reality checks just so you're prepared for what you're dealing with. If you have 10 rental properties, there's likely that one of them is going to have a tenant that's changing engines in the living room.
Now, come on, Brian. That sounds crazy. That can't be a real thing.
Here's what, just last week, I was talking to a podcast listener who's actually has turned into a client. We were doing some of our initial meetings, and I told him that because he says, you know what? It's funny you say that. He goes, because we were in charge of going and reviewing this apartment, and we saw a piece of plywood over the window, and I told the company that I need to see inside that apartment as we're trying to evaluate the deal, and they were like, no, it's okay, it just needs some repairs. He insisted, went in there. Sure enough, a guy was running a motorcycle repair shop out of the middle of his apartment.
In the apartment.
So and by the way, I didn't make this up. I had a client that back in Georgia had a client who was changing engines in his living room. So you can imagine the damage.
Come on. I mean, that makes sense, right? Because if you think about it, if you're in the garage and it's cold or it's hot, at least if you change in the living room, you can watch TV, you're close to the kitchen.
I think they're just maximizing all uses of the property. And then, the other thing, so if you have one changing an engine, you have another tenant that the commode's going to start leaking on them. Mm-hmm. And they're just going to be like, well, it's just a leak. Why do I need to worry about this little drip, drip, drip from the commode? Before you know it, the $75 dripping commode turns into an $8,000 mold repair because the black mold gets behind the sheetrock. You have to rip out all the sheetrock, rip out the fixtures. It turns into a disaster. That's going to be another one.
Because no matter how good of a tenant your tenant is, no matter how much they love you, they're not going to love your property as much as you love it.
It's not theirs. They're renting it. And then you're going to have another tenant that has gotten ticked off at you because they're already 2-3 months behind on rent. They go tell you a sob story. You're going to say, I still need to collect my rent. They're going to get mad at you. They're going to rip the cabinet doors off. They're going to punch holes in your sheetrock. They're going to stain your carpet. And look, I'm just giving you the situation. The good news is that 7 of these tenants, though, will be good tenants. But 3 of them are going to make your life a holy heck.
And here's the other thing. Even if you decided some of those tenants you didn't like, it's not even easy to get folks out of your property. There are actually formal court proceedings you have to go through to evict a tenant. So it's not even like you can get your property back just because you don't like what's happening in it.
So what we're telling you is that real estate is actually really hard work. None of this, when I give you the reality of it, sounds like passive income does it, because you're going to learn to do it right. A successful investor in real estate is going to require two things. The first, location, location, location. You need to know what this is where you're going to make the majority of your long-term money is. What was the purchase price? Because your capital gain, did you get it at a good value to where you're buying? And will it be a good market? And then your tenant screening process. This is how you keep the people out who are changing engines and doing all the unsavory things to your property that you in the long term want to generate income for many years to come.
And the third thing, even the third outside of those two, Brian, is that you have to have a healthy balance sheet.
Yep.
A lot of times when people buy a rental property, it's a levered asset that you're buying. And when you think about buying 10 properties, it's not really difficult to get way out ahead of your skis. You have to make sure your balance sheet can sustain having periods of vacancy or periods where you have to make repairs or having assets there so that you can account for some of these negative side effects of real estate investing.
You just said something that I think a lot of people don't respect the leverage. Look, it's exciting. Let me give you an example. If you buy a $100,000 rental property, and you can do that all day long in the Southeast for sure. I know in Georgia where we came from you could. So you buy a $100,000 rental property. You're thinking, okay, I have to put down $20,000 or 20%. But when the house appreciates, say it's worth $100,000 this year, next year, let's just not even worry about the tenant. Let's just think about it's now worth $105,000 12 months later. It appreciated by 5%. We saw this happen all the time. So on paper, your $100,000 investment that you only came out of pocket for $20,000 for is now worth $105,000. You just made $5,000 on a $20,000 investment. On paper, that looks like a 25% rate of return, all in 1 year. And you're like, oh my goodness, this is the greatest thing ever. So, because that's leverage. That's what leverage lets you do. It lets you take a little bit of money, buy a much bigger asset. So then when it returns 5%, the bigger asset does, because you only put up a little bit, you borrowed the rest, you get a much more accelerated rate of return. But here's the catch. And this is, I want to steal a quote from our favorite rich uncle, Warren Buffett. And I had you only find out who's swimming naked when the tide goes out.
Exactly right.
And what he was talking about he was actually talking about institutions, banks that went out there during the real estate crisis and got themselves over leveraged, and then they got themselves in trouble. The same thing happens to individual investors with real estate. And the fact that, yes, it is great, especially if you could make 25% or $5,000 on one, why not do it on 10? The problem is when you hit that recession, that leverage requires a down payment on $100,000, probably like a $500 a month mortgage payment. You do that by 10. Now we're talking about $5,000 a month. What happens if you have no tenants in those houses?
It gets scary.
And then what if you have to do repairs in those same months? Because now to get your money back out, you have to get the house back to rent ready. So you're having to replace carpet, you're having to paint walls, you have to replace cabinets, you have to fixing all the things. You can quickly see how your free money can very much get you in some financial trouble.
Become very expensive money.
So let's talk about this, because a lot of you are like, wait a minute, Brian. Let me tell you, I know how to turn this into passive. I'm just going to hire a management company.
Oh, it makes it easy.
Property management company is going to be a solution. And truthfully, that does make real estate a much more passive income source. The problem is most property managers are going to take at least 10% of your revenue collection. Guess where your profit probably lies?
It's going to be somewhere in that 10%. Right? That's kind of
So
where it's
you're
at.
back to the point. So are you actually getting passive income from rent, or is this a long-term play for capital appreciation? And the answer might be a combination of the two, but it's just that I know a lot of strategies I'm seeing out there is people who are saying, okay, you'll do your first property. After it appreciates 3 years in the future, you go refinance, pull the capital out, go buy another rental property. You can see you never actually own the property. You're just getting more and more leverage, expanding your empire. The music will stop at some point.
Exactly right.
So let's talk about how do you get to do real estate right? And here's what we want to talk about. First thing is, most people out there that you see on YouTube, infomercials, late night on TV, they're selling systems. But why should we always be skeptical of people selling income systems?
Yeah, when someone tells you that they've figured out the way to go out there and make $1 gazillion a year, just follow their tried and true tactics, my spidey sense immediately goes off, because I think to myself, if this person really had it figured out, Why would they be telling me? They should just be sitting back collecting all the money on themselves. It immediately lets me know that maybe they're trying to sell me something besides my actual future success.
Their profit is probably more likely coming from the system they're selling
That's right.
versus the actual strategies involved.
That's exactly right.
There's a reason. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and be honest with you guys. Not that we always are. I'm going to be transparent. That's probably a better way to say it. I feel like we're one of the early financial advisors to YouTube.
Sure.
We were one of the original
Yep.
podcast advisors. Do y'all notice you haven't seen Brian at a lot of conferences talking about his YouTube strategy? Do you know why? I don't want to share what I think is working and what's successful with my competition until I feel like we're way ahead of it. So why would anybody sell a system that creates more competition for them? That is your first clue that they're probably not actually trying to help you with a system to help you.
That's exactly right.
They're creating competition because they're making their money. By the way, we see this. There are a lot of financial advisors that are selling coaching and other things to other financial advisors. Why? I mean, maybe I'll stop there. But it's creating more competition is all it's doing. But we'll keep moving.
The second thing you said, Brian, you already hit on this, is you have to understand leverage. You have to understand the benefits of leverage and the risk of leverage. I think your example was fantastic that you worked through. Don't let yourself get out ahead of your skis. Understand how aggressive a real estate empire can be if you don't have the balance sheet to support it.
And then here's the thing. This is common sense to anybody who's an entrepreneur, run a business, is that this is a business, so you need to treat it that way. So this is where you go really do your homework. Let's focus on what you need to do. I've already mentioned you got to pay attention to location. That's going to be a big part of it. You got to pay attention to price paid, because this is where long-term it's going to determine what rent can you collect and get your money back as fast as possible to pay down debt. If you overpaid for the property, you're already underwater likely in the transaction. You need to know what the competition and what the rent collections in the area are, because that's going to play into it. And then last thing, Bo, and I want you to kind of share this with us, is how do the type of tenants or the location or where the property is, how does that impact things?
Yeah, so you really have to know the type of tenants that you'll work with. And we thought about sort of 3 different categories. There are college kids. If you're in a college town and you want to do like college rental properties, we have a lot of folks who do that because it is not difficult to have rental tenants in there. There's high turnover, and they tend to be really, really rough on the property.
Yeah, it's good that you have the backstop of probably parents that will, always go help them pay their rent. But it is tough that they're probably going to tear your place up a little bit, because they're first time they're away from home. They're going to treat it like it's their first house away from home. So realize that. But talk to them, because we mentioned there are places, like I think about high tech areas like Seattle and Silicon Valley, where if you are a landlord in those areas, you probably do pretty good, because you got high income people, you have highly educated.
That's
so
right.
these are not bad people. But what's the downside of why not everybody can do this?
Because they're transient. And so if you have to go buy a really, really expensive property that costs in the millions of dollars for it to be a rental property, and it might carry a mortgage payment that is $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month, and maybe you have someone in there that can pay that, there's a chance that person will be gone 6, 8, 10 months from now, and now you have a really, really expensive property that might not be the perfect property to be a rental property.
Yeah, no doubt. Some of those key areas where you could get great rent, like the Silicon Valleys, like Seattle, they're going to have a huge purchase price on the rental property. So that's going to keep out a lot of people, because you're like, well, wow, that's what I want. I want quality tenants. But you have to realize, to get some of those quality tenants, you probably have a much higher purchase price. Right. There's a give and take there. I'm kind of getting my Bernie Mac, the 3 things. You can only get 2 of the 3. Because the last one is, where's the easiest property to buy? Is usually you can go buy low price property to tenants that can't qualify to buy houses themselves. These are the houses, when I was talking about, like, I know where we're from in South Atlanta, you can buy a $60,000, $70,000 rental property all day long. But the problem is that you're going to be dealing with low purchase price, but high headaches. Because this is the people that are changing the engines. This is the people that are going to tear your property up, because there's a reason they cannot qualify to buy their own property. So just know the type of tenant you're going to deal with, and that's going to really help you out with real estate. And then you got to create a cash flow. An outlook with 3 variations. We talk about this all the time with any business. This is how I think. Option 1 is, this is how I think things will go. Option 2 will be, holy cow, this really is going to work out. We're going to be rich.
Right.
And then the last one is, man, this is a dumpster fire. How did we ever get into this? I have ruined my financial life by getting into this crazy scheme.
And I think the thing that you have to do is you have to really take that third scenario very seriously and understand the power and need to have liquidity and cash reserves. Because there are going to be times when you might have to pay for the rent or the utilities while you're looking for the next tenant. And houses, they're assets that things go wrong. You have to replace roofs. You have to replace AC units. You need to make sure that you have capital in place where you can make those improvements. Any good business would have cash in reserves, so you owning a rental business have to do the same thing.
Last thing that I want to close out real estate. All of my retirees, people who think you're getting close to the end of you're working with your hands, your back, your arms, and your wages. You do not want to be over-levered in retirement. Remember, by retirement, you need to be completely debt-free. That goes for investment debt, too.
Yep.
So that's why realize if you're going to do this, I want you to think about it in terms of how do I do this without being encumbered tremendously? And I know that's going to go against a lot of people, but this is what's going to keep you protected from when the music stops. You're not going to let these decisions ruin your entire financial life.